Hello, everyone. Today, welcome to HAMAA Live. We have an amazing guest for you today. As you guys may have known through Instagram, Simply Samurai myself, samurai culture has always been one of my most loved subjects. And with Yasuke, the African samurai, being one of the biggest focuses in my whole career and life, we have the author, Professor Thomas Lockley, with the Yasuke, the African samurai.
Hello. Thank you for
Hello.
absolute honor. We met 4 years ago in different circumstances, and
Very much so.
now we're meeting right now in different circumstances. So, it's an honor thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sure we'll have some other talks as well as we go through the future. For all the viewers at home, this is Professor Thomas Lockley, the author, one of the authors for the book, and they have so many questions for you, Thomas. But I'm also going to give a little bit of background for us. During the pandemic times, I was really doing more path. I was trying to find out how Yasuke went through his own path and research. And back in 2008, I did my own research on Yasuke. Then I saw Professor Thomas Lockley's book, and I was like, wow. Especially during the pandemic, I'm like, I'm just going to reach out to him and see if we can maybe come in contact and talk more. And you were so generous to reply, and we had a nice little talk then too.
I wanted to support you guys. It seemed like a great thing to do. It's difficult times, right? There's times when you got to stick together. You got to do what you can to keep the world going on, and that's what. Yeah. And then it comes down 4 years later. You're a big star, and all this goes on. And well, let's talk.
I'm just once again, let's talk more about your book. And we have one of the questions I'll first start off with. What gave you the idea for doing the book, Yasuke the African Samurai?
Well, I don't think anybody can say that it's not a good story, right? It's Yasuke's story is one of the most awesome stories I've ever come across, and the fact is that it's fact. It's history.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't make it up, really. It's impossible to make Yasuke's story up. Nobody could even conceive of it, and it astonishes me nobody ever bothered doing it before, and that's it. And Yasuke delivered it to me and said sometime in a dream, sometime write my story. That's not true, but
No, but that's not that artistic license you're able to use and everything.
yeah.
For those of you who haven't read the book, Thomas, what can you tell them? Just the main premise of the book with Yasuke the African Samurai.
This book and this book are both the same, but this book is in America, and this one is if you're in the rest of the world. This is the book you'll see. But I'll talk about this one because it's in my hand right now. Essentially, it is as far as we could get it. Me and Jeffrey, my co-author, as far as we could get it, 100% fact. There are places which are not quite factual. There are imagined from best guess, but from research. So if you look at the Kyoto scenes, or you look at some scenes in the castles, for example, I mean, we don't have a text that says Yasuke was there at that time, but we know he was there sometime. So we looked at the castle, what it looked like. We went walking, and we wrote that into the book. So this is a history book, which is easy to read. It's a book which is as close as possible to the facts that we could get them, but it's easily read. And to be honest with you, a lot of people say it's like reading a novel, which is I'm very proud of having been part of that with Jeffrey, to be able to make an easily read history book.
That's so cool. And I do, for those of you not just trying to sell this book, going through research myself and trying to find all these things. The compendium of his book, they even have I don't have my book with me because I'm here, my friends in St. Louis in the better area. I like how you have your sources in the back. Like you actually talk about all the pages, talk about where you found the things. You can do your own research on what they did the research on, which leads me to another question. Also, could you put up one of the pictures where it had some of the depictions of some of the Africans that were in Japan? So we have with this one, I know we used at the bottom of the book. When you came across this picture, what did you think, or how does this translate to other Africans in Japan?
Well, this picture is a picture that's on Wikipedia. It's not one that I've come across personally. It's not one I've researched personally. What we have here is we have an ambassador thought to be from Macau or possibly from Goa, which were Portuguese held territories at the time. In the front here, we have a Japanese lad dressed in European clothing, and he is part of the ambassador's entourage. He's probably coming back from Europe at the time. The African here is depicted as holding the parasol. The African here is not a bodyguard like Yasuke was. The African here is more of a valet, a personal servant, a gentleman's gentleman, if you want to terminology, right? And behind here we have Jesuit priests. You can tell the difference because the hats, etc., and the clothes. Go to other pictures like these, you're going to see far more varied and diverse African faces. This is another one of a very similar type, but you've got African faces with bodyguards, with weapons, with bows and arrows, with swords, and with spears. They are the mercenaries. They're the people. You can see some in this picture here, just towards the back. We have one with a spear here, an African with a spear. We have one holding a horse. We have here a standard bearer. We could conceive of Yasuke arriving in Kuchinotsu in southern Japan as a man looking like that. We can conceive of that. That is not Yasuke personally, but we can conceive that he might look something like that when he was sure.
And I like that when we talk about conceives, and that we'll have some other questions where people they're asking defenders of like, what did he do? What did he have? And I think it's hard on the stage. There wasn't solid proof, especially we think about the time after Oda Nobunaga when his whole dynasty, a lot of things were burned to the ground, and a lot of like Akechi, they did not like Yasuke being there because he is not Japanese and removing some of his footprint on some parts.
That's conceivably true, but also we don't really know about Yasuke. That was reported by the Jesuits. A lot of the things that they report are not necessarily exactly what happened. They're doing it for political audience and political reasons back in Europe, and we only have their words for it. The Japanese sources we have do not give any feeling of that kind of thing at all. All of them are very positive about Yasuke. All of them say what a handsome guy he is, how strong he is, strength of 10 men, intelligent. He's good, entertaining. Look, his lord Nobunaga can't keep him away because he's becoming a close person in Nobunaga's life. So, the few sources we have about Yasuke is really difficult to say. But I reckon that in general, I don't think he didn't pee off that many people in Japan.
No, that's so cool. That's a great thing to hear. And I think about people were asking, where do you think his origin of Yasuke was personally? I know once again people they look in the book, not trying to give all the secrets of your book, but personally from your research, what do you think?
Well, I originally thought he was from what is now South Sudan, judging on his looks, his height. The people of South Sudan, the Dinka people,
How tall was he? In theory.
The Dinka people of South Sudan are the tallest people in the world. And Yasuke, there's no doubt about it, he was around about 188 centimeters tall. That's 6 foot. I don't know what that is in 6 foot.
I think it's 6'3", 6'2".
It's huge.
Yeah.
Right? And the Dinka have always been these very, very tall people. Also, they have very dark skin, and the Japanese sources describe him as having skin the color of ink. So I originally, from physical descriptions, that he was from that region. However, there is a couple of secondary sources that say he's from Mozambique. The people from Mozambique and the Mozambique ambassador to Japan told me this don't meet that description. So,
interesting.
They're very different in looks and very different in height, especially. So, what she told me was that he's more likely, if he did come there from Mozambique, he'd come from a different area of Eastern Africa to get to that place. So, we don't know.
No, I mean, I think it's a perfectly honest question. We don't have a time machine. We don't actually have the pictures. You don't know. All you can make is educated guesses.
Correct. I'm 50-50 on
it. Hey, that's better than I have any right on. Going to another point is I have someone also from my Instagram is SunSage7. They were and Jess Smith and many others were asking. They're saying, thank you for bringing this up. It'll be good to ask them what the sources are so everyone can see and put this to rest. Because they're saying they hate how all the vitriol things coming out. But for yourself, where are the sources that you found?
All right, this is important. This is dead important. What sources are there to say that Yasuke did what he did and was there? Okay, number one, we've got the Jesuit sources, and they are the most wide-ranging. So we have the sources from the Jesuits, the reports they sent back to Europe from Japan. In there, We hear about him causing riots because people have never seen such a tall black man before. We hear about the church nearly being knocked down because people trying to get at Yasuke to touch him like he's a god, this kind of thing. We hear about his audience with Nobunaga. We hear about the fact that Nobunaga and he were becoming increasingly friendly, that he had a house, that he had servants. And in the end, we hear about his last battle at Honnoji, where Nobunaga performed seppuku in the end, and Yasuke then goes to his new lord. He's loyal. He's loyal to his Japanese clan. He goes to his new lord, Nobunaga's son. Didn't last long. The clan is got rid of, essentially. Yasuke then is delivered back to the church, and the priests give thanks to God for his deliverance. That's what we know from the Jesuit sources. Then we've got two good Japanese sources. Oda Gyuichi, who is the biographer of Nobunaga. He talks about the meeting between Yasuke and Nobunaga, the first one, how Yasuke has the strength of 10 men, the color of an ox, and is also good demeanor, and describes their meeting. He also, in another source, describes the giving of the sword, the name, Yasuke, suggesting Nobunaga gave him the name, but not. There's frustratingly, it's not 100%. We don't know.
Gotcha.
And basically reporting that Nobunaga has employed him as a retainer, which a lot of people are saying, what is a retainer? What is a samurai? They're basically the same thing. You cannot be a samurai without being a retainer. You could be a retainer without being a samurai. That's possible. You could be a servant. You could be a merchant in the offices. These things happen as well. But basically, if you're given a sword and you're made a retainer, you are at that time you would have been a warrior and classed as that. The word samurai itself is a different word. It means different things at this time than to what we think about it today. But you can say in contemporary terms, he would have been classed as a samurai.
Gotcha.
The final source is in some ways the best source. It's a diary by a lord called Matsudaira Ietada, and it says his height. It gives the height at 6'3", I think you said. 180. It gives his skin as the color of black ink. It gives the fact that he is employed by Nobunaga. He's been given money. He's been the words used suggest he is a paid, salaried member of Nobunaga's entourage. And all of these are definitely Yasuke. One, because his name is used in some of them, and two, because the ones that even don't use his name refer to the fact how he got there with the Jesuit. There is no other African man at this time that fits that description. So we know all of those are Yasuke. And then we've got the artwork, which I think is going to be shown a little bit later on. Some of it, sumo.
Actually, yeah, we can pull that one up, actually. Also, would you pull up the sumo one right there?
We have here clearly a non-Japanese man with very black skin. This is being authenticated by artists, art historians in Japan. We're 99% certain this is Yasuke. But that's not Yasuke's portrait. This is 20 years afterwards. The people have remembered that an African man was in Japan at that time in Nobunaga's entourage as a fighting warrior. That's him doing martial art training. Okay. Sadly, that's not what he looks like, because people are imagining it. It's 30 years later. They have no idea what an African man looks like. The guy that painted that or that printed it doesn't know. He's imagining what an African guy looks like. But we know that the memory, and this is important, we know that the memory of Japan at that time, Yasuke stayed in the popular memory. He was a star. He was not just somebody who disappeared off into history, as we could easily think that. In Japan, he stayed in popular memory, and there's actually a set of lacquerware jars and brush cases and stuff which have a very, very striking black man on, very tall, swords, rich clothing, and it's believed that that's Yasuke as well. So again, 30, 40 years later, not this one, this is a modern 20th century Yasuke. I don't think we've got pictures of the gunpowder. You can go to my Facebook page, Thomas Lockley Author, and you can see pictures there if you want to. Of course, you can buy the book as well. That's always good. It's often on offer, so sometimes you can get it for
No,
a couple of dollars. So yeah.
I,
All
I
right.
think it's a really good resource as well. But you're
Yeah.
gonna say, I'm sorry.
These are all the sources for Yasuke, who he was, what he did. It's incontrovertible. All these people that are online right now attacking some black guy got lost in Japan. That's not it. He was much more than that.
Was there now, if I remember correctly, and I meant to bring my book so I could have it read from the excerpt, but you talked about how you guys found, was there a painting at some time that had lots of uh, letters and things stuffed into the back of the painting? Eventually, were found. So, could you elaborate on that?
So the paintings were discovered in the 20th century, and the packaging that had been used was the letters from the Jesuits. They were recycling paper. Paper in this era was really expensive, and
Sure.
in Europe they still really weren't always using paper. They were using various other things if it was possible, or they were using high quality paper from Japan. That was the best paper you could get in Europe. But also they were whatever these screens were, they were probably a gift from a Japanese ruler to some ruler in Europe, probably Portugal, but they weren't delivered. And whatever happened, these were found in the early 20th century, and the packaging behind them to keep them safe was these letters. The letters weren't unknown, but they were different letters before they'd been edited. So you've got the truth. The truth is too much because they've been edited 3 or 4 times on the way, right? But
Sure.
and stuff about the whole of this Jesuit mission, which includes Yasuke. So the guy that translated them into Japanese, Murakami Naojiro, professor 100 years ago, he translated all of these Jesuit reports into Japanese. He kind of mixed the official version and the new version, which I hope I'm right on this. He found them in Portugal as well. So he was working off a double one to get the Japanese version, which is the only version to date which is actually published properly. There's no English version, as far as I know. There's no Portuguese version. You have to read them in Japanese, even though they're originally written in Portuguese.
Wow, so that's interesting at that point. So you come with the translation. It was how the people were interpreting it. This is where history, and I don't think that people understand, this is where being a historian, finding these things, cross-referencing, there's this, I don't want to say chance, but people change things, even if just little things.
That's what I was talking about. So this is one of a range of products. And this is a gunpowder jar. So this is another.
Go back to the other one, Osa. Oh, wait, I want to go to the gunpowder jar real quick. Go back to that.
Okay, so when you've got a matchlock rifle, you have literally gunpowder, and you have to take it into battle in a jar like this. This would be hanging on a rope or a string in Japan normally, and the straw. You can't see my hands going. The straw string would around it, and then the entrance at the top is where the powder is. So you put the powder into your aquabus, and then you put the jar back. Of course, it's a fashion item as well, and so Yasuke is I don't know, Louis Vuitton of his time.
At that time, yeah.
They're on the fashion item. And the second picture you showed was the...
Yeah, bring that back up, Osa, pretty please.
Yeah. A pencil box. It's not pencil box, it's for brushes, because people use brushes to write in those days. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse here, but this well here is where the ink would have gone. And then
the left part
would have been in there. And you can see that we have an African. It's impossible to say that it is Yasuke, but look at his clothes. He's got silken shoes in a time when most people went barefoot. He's got a cape of velvet. He's got 2 swords. They're European swords, but 2 swords in the old Japanese manner, not the 2 swords on the side, but hung down from the belt. This is an ancient Japanese. That only nobles would have worn because it's from a time when sword bearers were only of a very high rank, before the Yasuke time when anybody could pick up a sword and just go and fight. And this here is the wrestling in all its glory. We have here Yasuke. This one we can say is Yasuke for definite. from memory, not portrait. Another order samurai. You have 10 waiting. It's 11 actually, but I always think that his strength of 10 men. He's got 10 men there waiting for him, and I wonder whether this is a joke that the artist made. And right here in the left, you can't quite see it. This guy is testing his muscles like that. You can only just see it in this version. If you see the whole thing, you can see it. It's like he's, am I strong enough to have a go at Yasuke? Shall I give it a go as well? It's a beautiful picture. And then you got the court. Can we get that up one more time? Yeah, and then you got the court. So this is believed to be Nobunaga here, the furthest right up the top. Believed to be Nobunaga. These are his court, his close entourage. They're smoking. They got the swords down there, and they're watching the entertainment.
Yeah,
I just think this is, and I saw this in the flesh, and it might even be able to get a picture of that. It's an amazing piece of art. It's an amazing piece of art, and you can just see the life in there, the life of the warrior, the life of the court. Excellent.
and I love that, and I love that you can see it and you can hear it in your voice when you talk about this. The childlike wonder. You're just like, isn't it so cool to actually see this? And that's the kind of thing that you joined when you shared this.
Yeah, childlike wonder. Great words. Yeah, I when I saw that, I had a childlike wonder. I just felt like a kid again, like with a chocolate factory, and it's this is Yasuke.
And someone was saying that they heard that he used the cannon in the Battle of Yamazaki. I'm not familiar with that one, but
it's not the Battle of Yamazaki. It's the Battle of Okayazama. I know not Okayazama. Okitanawate. We don't know whether that was him or not. It's an African. It's described as an African person, a man, but we don't actually know whether that's Yasuke or not.
Gotcha.
2 years after this, I think, Okitanawate, which is in Kyushu.
Awesome. And that also goes to another point where people say, they talk about slave, servant, all these things. I remember the depiction, even though it's been 4 years since I read the book, and I roughly read it again, where you talk about Zillion they're coming to the city, and then they have Yasuke come off the boat, and he has a spear and this dagger, and they talk about how formidable force he looked. So we fully believe that he's a bodyguard. He was a bodyguard. He had all these other experiences before then. He said in India, which would have been Malaysia, and he said one other place as well. China? Macau. So that goes, as far as I'm concerned, mostly puts it to rest. He had all these experiences, and then as he came of age, he became a soldier and a bodyguard, you believe?
Macau and Malacca, he was on his journey. It was a long journey in those days. You couldn't just get on an airplane. You had to go for months and months on the ship, and you'd have to spend months waiting for the winds and the tides to be right for you to go on the next leg. So Macau and Malacca, he was there for 6 to 9 months, if memory serves me right. You can check the details in the book. It wasn't necessarily on purpose. It's because you couldn't get to the next leg. But his boss, Valiano, the Jesuit, used that time to just check out his surroundings and the missions there. He wouldn't have been fighting in those places. There was no fighting going on. In India, there's debate as to whether he was a mercenary in India first. There's no way of telling whether that's it. It's just one of the hypothesized things. In India, 99% of the Africans at this time were soldiers. They were mercenaries. They were employed by all sorts of rulers for all sorts of things, mainly for killing. And if he was, then that's what Yasuke would have done. In the book, it's hypothesized that he was a member of a mercenary gang. It's highly likely if he was from there. The thing about his employer, Valiano, he was going to Japan. Japan is in the middle of a war, has been for more than 100 years. It's a danger. But he's a priest. He can't carry a sword himself. He can't defend himself. He's got to turn the other cheek. So what do you do? You employ Yasuke. You get the biggest guy. It makes common sense. You get the biggest and most scary warrior you can find, and you take him with you as your bodyguard. And that's where we got the conceptual framework for that from.
And do you think these are all conjecture at this point, and unless there's some things that you read I wasn't sure, but after when they talk about going through the towns and when Oda Nobunaga's people actually came and then took him away from Villeneuve with this part. He's like, we want him, and he thought it was talking about the Jesuits. He's like, no, he wants Yasuke, and then you guys can come to the city there. Was there depiction of that? We were not sure. Was that just artistic writing? What do you feel?
That's a bit of artistic. A bit artistic.
That's all right. It's a good story.
What it says is that the Father Organtino, who was one of the fathers who was present, took him to see Nobunaga. So the part of the book where Nobunaga's soldiers come and break up the riot, that's correct. The part where they must have knocked on the door and said, "We're here," but that tiny sentence, "No, we want to hit him," that
that's all right. I like that. It's a good story.
Itself is absolutely factual from that letter, from that report. We don't know what they said exactly, so
no, I like it. That's the kind of artistic license that you can take and tell the story. It's still that filling in between, which is fine. And Host was saying, so that means that he was not a slave, that he was more of a sellsword / bodyguard up to this point for sure then. Or most likely.
In this area, the meaning of slave is very, very different from what we conceive of it today. Whether he was a slave or not is irrelevant. He was the bodyguard. And even what we think of as slavery in those days was not quite the same. Some of the slaves rose to be kings and generals all over the world. And I don't want to say that he was a slave or not a slave at first, because it's likely that he was human trafficked as a child. Somewhere
as a child, yeah, 100%.
He was captured and sold and human trafficked in brutal circumstances at some point. But what he was by the time he was in his late teens and by the time he got to Japan in his early 20s was not what we would think of as a slave. He was probably quite well off already, and by the time he got to Nobunaga, who at their first meeting gave him a massive amount of money, he was a rich man. And he had weapons, he was trusted, he was the man who was in charge of security of of the most important Catholic in the whole of Asia. I mean, this is not some random priest that he's serving here. This is the most important man sent by Pope Gregory XIII from Rome to check that the missions are okay. So let's take the terminology of slave out and look at the man himself.
Gotcha. 1 second, I was having some problem with my audio, but real quick, I can still ask, when we had people, so do you think they trained him obviously he became an Oda Nobunaga's care, but I think they trained him a little bit too? Well,
somewhere along the line, whether it was India or Japan, he would have had training, both of them probably. I mean, we can see that picture of sumo wrestling, right? Sumo wrestling is originally training for war. It is battlefield. Today it's a sport, but in those days it was training for what you do on a battlefield. If you need to wrestle somebody to deal with, you do it. So you need to have that practice first. So we've got that proof that he was engaged in some kind of martial art. It's likely then that he was engaged within other martial arts that were going on at the time. There's no direct proof of that, but we do know that he was with Oda's very small entourage, and he was one of Nobunaga's men. So what do warriors do?
I see. No, it's an interesting part. Also, I'm not sure if you had the part where I wanted to play the part from Assassin's Creed, a little intro that they have. If you could play that, I'm not sure if you found it something to show the viewers. It's interesting what the depictions they're trying to work on now.
Okay, that's it.
Wouldn't let you do it.
Well, from memory.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Should have watched this before we came on, but from memory, I mean, again, Assassin's Creed is a game. It's not fact. It's based on Yasuke's life. It's not a factual depiction of Yasuke's life. It is romanticized. He has his armor on and all of that kind of stuff. Did he have armor like that? We can't say, and we have no depiction of him like that. The only battle we have factual source to say that he was at was the Honnoji, and unfortunately, that the men on Yasuke's side had been sleeping until minutes earlier, and they didn't have time to prepare. They were in their pajamas essentially. They were in their sleeping kimono. They grabbed their swords and they went and they fought. So he wouldn't have been dressed in armor in that battle either.
might be back. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Where did we get off? Shall I start again?
Yeah, on the last part, if you would. I'm sure they can hear you back in here.
We're talking about armor, right? And we're talking about the Assassin's Creed portrays him in armor, full on Japanese armor. The only battle we have a source for that he fought in was the Honnoji incident, and that they'd been asleep up until seconds before. They were woken by gunfire and the smell of smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he didn't have time to get armor on in that battle. He would have got out into battle with his sleeping kimono, grabbed his sword from the side where it would have been next to his futon, and just gone out and fought. That's what they all did in that battle. So they didn't have time to put their armor on.
Mm-hmm.
However, did he have armor in another time, in another place? Did he have that armor at the bottom of his bed that night? Didn't get to use it? We don't know. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. I see. Now, it's interesting with the depictions where we talk about, obviously, he was gifted the sword, things he wants is in Lord Nobunaga's care. In the katana, they talk about this being a bond, of course, and I think some samurai culture, of course, gets romanticized. It's almost like a Arthurian legend, but we do understand that he's probably given one. And then we also think about other weaponry, like the kanabo. Do you think, was there anything talking about him carrying these types of weapons? What did we have other than spears and daggers, or were you sure?
The only one we know that he definitely had for sure is a sword, the katana that you have there. We don't know any more than that, unfortunately.
No, that's right.
It doesn't mean that he didn't have them. It just means that we have a record for it. So,
no, I think that's really interesting. It's really cool.
Two mentions of him with a sword. The first mention is got a sword from Nobunaga, and then the last one is that he gave that sword up when he surrendered or was defeated at the end. Whether it was his sword or whether it was Nobunaga's sword is unclear. There is a legend that said he took Nobunaga's head and his sword so that they didn't get caught, they didn't get captured. And therefore he took them to Nobunaga's heir, Nobutada, his son. Nobody knows what happened to those. So we don't know.
So that's also another question. It is really insightful. I'm glad you guys think so. One of my friends, R. Melvin 1, he said, has there made his descendants linked or currently to Yasuke? And that we said we're not sure where he went, but I'll let you answer that.
Hang on, my screen has just gone blank. Sorry.
That's all right. We can still see you if not.
Oh, you can still see. That's great. Okay. Have there been any descendants linked to Yasuke? No.
Okay.
Simple.
Gotcha. No.
We don't know where he died. We don't know how he died. We don't know when he died. And the problem is that unless you know those details, you can't work out where the blood would have been spread, if you like. And,
sure.
So sadly, we can't. We do know that certain places that he lived, Kuchinotsu, where he arrived, Honnoji, the temple, etc. And we know that he survived that battle. But how long was he wounded? Did he surrender because he couldn't fight anymore? All these questions are there and they're unanswered, and we will never know until somebody finds something in an old temple somewhere, and that's what I'm waiting for. I have no idea, man.
And I think that's interesting. I know a lot of people don't like taking answers for those kind of answers. They're like, well, why don't we know? Like, there's so many, you're just not sure. And there's so many things to be discovered. We're still finding things. But it's really cool that we can still have our own conjecture and think about it, but we know he existed. Also, with the Japanese nobility, obviously this time was in Lord Nobunaga's care and being a friend, not just in that part, like they became friends. What was his rank in the nobility, or what was his presence, do you think?
Well, we don't have an answer to that either. But what we do have is an idea, because if he's in Nobunaga's closest entourage, this is like 30 men, right? To be in that close entourage of the most powerful warlord in Japan, that's quite something. We do know that there were other Africans just a little bit later in the entourage of other lesser lords, but we don't really have records for them because they're lesser lords, right? The only reason we have great records for Yasuke is because he was serving the powerful man and probably even to this day, the most famous man in Japanese history. I mean, this is a man, you walk into any bookshop anywhere in the country here in Japan, and you will see a book about Nobunaga. You might not see a book about anything else, but there will be a book about Nobunaga there. This is a national hero of many sorts. And so, in a way, Yasuke was fortunate that he was serving Nobunaga, because that is why we have all these records.
Sure, it could have been Hideyoshi, everyone after, or someone Toyotomi. It would not have been as renowned, but Oda Nobunaga was just, well, I mean, he was a great unifier. Yeah, that's the only other one.
Yeah. And then with Tokugawa Ieyasu, we've got people like William Adams. For the same reason, they are remembered because they were with Tokugawa Ieyasu. It's the same reason. They weren't with lesser nobles, and we don't lose those records. So.
No, that is a great point. You bring up William Adams in that part. That makes sense. Yeah, so that covers, like another friend was saying, they were saying the roles, like Yasuke were the Africans, so there were other ones, but they're lesser lords, so we don't have the information. That makes perfect sense. Now, this is a great little segue.
We do have some information about these people.
Okay.
My favorite one is Kato Kiyomasa, who was a Japanese lord. He was a major lord, about 10. The record comes from the early 1590s. There is an African man. We don't know his name. He's just described as an African man. He was essentially a trade advisor and an interpreter, and he sorted out trade between Japan, the Philippines, and Korea. It was a triangular trade. And he was sent on these missions somehow to facilitate this trade. I'm not entirely sure. I guess he was an interpreter, but also knew what he was looking for in the Philippines. He'd probably come via Manila, for example, to get to Japan. Anyway, he's in the service, close service of Kato Kiyomasa. Another story that we have is of a man called Anthony. He's in the service to the English East India Company. He's the only man that we have a source that's saying he's literate at this time, because we have a source saying one of the merchants got a letter from Anthony, but sadly we don't have the letter. Anthony himself was used as an agent by the English East India Company. He was used as an agent. Yeah, and there are plenty of others as well. Many of them could be Yasuke, maybe they're not. We don't know. Tea ceremony paraphernalia by Nobunaga. Sadly not. I have no evidence to anything with anything to do with tea ceremony.
Sure, and once again, I can say for this, the question was answered. There's not anything saying that he didn't. We just didn't know that it did. You got to think that Oda Nobunaga liked nice things. He liked doing these things, so I'm sure he was catching these things or had his own choice to have these, but nothing documented. That's kind of a hard thing. That's why using our imagination, thinking about it, it's possible. Before when we segue to something, I wanted to say, sorry, we looked at it. No, we'll just go to it. What you just wrote another book recently, correct? Like, no,
thank you very much. Yes, this is a great opportunity. Thank you. It's called A Gentleman from Japan. It's the untold story of an incredible journey from Asia to Queen Elizabeth's court. And I was looking for somebody like Yasuke, a Japanese person like Yasuke, that did similar things to Yasuke, but outside Japan. So this is my reverse Yasuke. His name is Christopher in the English sources, but we don't know his real Japanese name. But he went to England and did almost as many fantastically amazing things as Yasuke did in Japan. And there's a lot of war in there. If you're a battle person, and I'm presuming a lot of your people, Simply Samurai, Spencer, are war fans, there's a lot in here as well. It's not the same kind of warfare. It's pirate warfare, it's piratical. But if you like the Yasuke, the African Samurai books, I think you'll like this. This was out last week, May the 21st, and it's available on Amazon in the US and Japan and anywhere in the world, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's like we have technology nowadays, we can find it.
Yeah, check it out. Thank you.
No problem. I just wanted to plug that as well, and that I will definitely check that out because I liked your reading from before. But as we start to wrap up, if you'd hold both of the books from before, once again, of the Yasuke ones, here at HAMAA, we really appreciate the showing, and we like seeing the culture, especially for Africans, because we're all about African diaspora and trying to get more of these things out there. I'm not saying Thomas has not paid me to say this, not in this part. I really like these books, and when I was doing the research myself, this was a nice little segue for me to find these things and then do my own research on them. But to be honest, it's kind of like the Bar Burton would always say, you don't have to take my word for it. Go read the book yourself. They really are good.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
It means a lot.
It has been a catalyst in my career, very much so. And we talk about there's some interesting other information that we have coming up through the new video game stuff going on that I can't divulge yet, but it's really interesting to be a part of this. And I think that you've really helped me get there. Did you have anything else for our viewers today, Thomas? Anything you'd like to say, especially with the Historical African Martial Arts Association?
If I did help you to get there anyway, that would be wonderful. But I didn't help you. You helped yourself. And if you happen to read a couple of books on the way, one of which is mine, then good. Go out there, read books, and help yourself and get there. And I can't wait to hear what your news is.
Thank you so much, my friend. And I hope all the viewers at home, I hope the viewers that see this later really appreciate that we had a chance to talk with Thomas. I hope to have some other times to talk with Thomas once we give out some more news and some other projects they might be working on in the future. So thank you guys. I know we have more questions to ask, but if you have any other questions, please put them in the comments. We will have other time to ask Thomas them whenever he's not busy. But you're in Tokyo, right? Right now?
Yeah. Tokyo.
So
what time is it? It's 9:50 in Tokyo.
9:50 for Tokyo, and he has to go to work. I think 10:30 is his time. So we're giving some time to prep.
I'm already at work. This is my work this morning.
Oh, perfect.
I have a meeting in half an hour. That's correct. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll let you have time for that. Oh, so did you have anything else for us? We good? Did you have anything else you wanted to tell?
Thank you for having me on. It's been a great honor, and everybody, good luck to you, and take care. Please don't let this Yasuke talk get you down. It's disappointing. It's horrible. There's no need for it. No need for it. Let's just go out and celebrate the life of a great guy.
That's what I think. At that point, any publicity is good publicity, and we'll show them the way. So if not, thank you guys. Until next time, HAMAA Live. We have some other. Oh, actually, one other last question. We had Luke Leyland, who was doing Dambe boxing. So this is boxing in Nigeria. He had a question. He told me, asked, do you know if Yasuke had any kind of preparation techniques, or was there anything found in any of the books about how he prepared for battle, or just his own peace of mind?
Sadly, we don't have any information from Yasuke personally. All of the sources are from other people. So unfortunately, I would love to have Yasuke's voice somewhere, but unfortunately, we don't have it yet.
That's all right. All right. That was all.
The sumo, the picture of the sumo is preparing for battle, right?
Yeah. That's good enough for me. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, guys, follow the HAMAA Live. We will have more. We're looking to do one a month at least. I'll be doing some trip to France and some other work for some historical societies, but we will get them in when we can. So thank you guys. I appreciate you.
The Historical African Martial Arts Association's Hero Series celebrates the great military leaders of Africa's past. Order yours today at teespring.com.